Hello and welcome. Today I am joined by Dr. Ciaran Cosgrave, who is sport and exercise medicine physician, and he's not just an Irish fan, he's actually the current team doctor at the senior Irish rugby team. So Ciaran, thank you for joining.
Hi Andy, thanks for the invite. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, great. And so whereabouts are you at the moment?
So I'm phoning in from the Shelbourne Hotel in Dublin. This is where we spend our match weekends. So we spend the early part of the week out in Carton House in Kildare, and then for the weekend we come into town. So really beautiful hotel right in the centre of Dublin. The lads like the change of scenery, and under non-COVID times, it's a great way to kind of escape camp and go for a wander, go for a coffee, go for a bite. But can't do that. But still a really nice place to be, and we get treated very well here. So I'll not complain.
Very good. Yeah, so what's it like in Dublin then? I used to be there every other couple of months, but yeah, what's it like at the moment?
I think Dublin have been reasonably strict from a protocols point of view, and we had quite a harsh lockdown and have very gradually been easing the restrictions. As a result, I think they've done a good job of managing numbers. Importantly, the hospitals never got overrun, the ICUs never got overrun, and the number of deaths were kept relatively speaking quite low, and as appropriately as the a large percentage of the population have taken up the vaccine, they've been able to lift the restrictions. So we're almost fully out of lockdown, but as with many places, we're starting to see the numbers creep up. So it'll be interesting to see what happens over the next few months, particularly over Christmas. But I'd say at the minute we're not too bad in the place. Obviously, the government's priority is to make sure that people don't get sick, go to hospital, go to ICU, and die. But from a rugby point of view, we have to make sure that rugby games go ahead. So I think our protocols in rugby just have to be that bit more strict than the public health protocols, and that upsets the players and staff, understandably. But if we get cases within camp, even though people aren't going to get sick, games will get cancelled. And if games get cancelled and there's no money coming in, then rugby all of a sudden stops being sustainable. So it's a tough line to sort of to not to cross one side or the other.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can imagine. And so how's the prep going then for your next match?
Good, yeah. Big match of the weekend, playing the All Blacks this weekend. And I think every country in the world enjoys that opportunity to play the All Blacks. For a long time, I think it was 120 years or something, Ireland hadn't beaten the All Blacks. But we've beaten them twice in the last couple of years. So we know we can do it now. We've got that monkey off our back. So the lads can enter into the games with a bit more confidence. And we had a great performance last week against Japan, and I think they're looking to build on that and hopefully put in a good performance and get the result.
Great, cool. So getting back to you then. So whereabouts are you from originally?
So originally from Belfast. Grew up in Belfast. Went to school there. Went to Queen's University in Belfast. But actually haven't lived in Belfast for about 15 years now. I've been living and working in Dublin for the past 9 years. So. I'm married a girl from Dublin, and I've got 4 Dublin children, so I think I'm stuck here for the foreseeable anyway.
And what prompted your interest in getting involved in medicine?
Medicine runs in the family. My grandfather was a GP, and my uncle subsequently became a GP and took over that practice. Parents weren't involved in medicine, but it was always in the family, and it's for as long as I can remember, it's the job I've wanted to do. I always remember my mum saying she can't remember, when people would say, what do you want to do when you grow up? I'd always said doctor. When I was about 15, 16, and you're making the choices for A levels, which then dictate your, college degree and all the rest. I remember getting the prospectus out to have a look and see, is there anything else out there that actually would interest me, flicking through. And there wasn't. There was nothing that piqued me interest the way, doing medicine, being a doctor would be. So it's made choices reasonably easy because I didn't have that uncertainty of, I don't know what to do, I don't know what I want to do, I don't know what subjects to pick. It streamlined it very simply for me. I knew I had to do the sciences, I had to get the grades at GCSE at A level to get into university. So it made decisions very easy when I knew what I wanted to do all along.
Yeah, no, sounds like it. But I'm sure there'll be challenges along the way. But has there been any point where you thought, actually, maybe I'm doing the wrong thing?
Genuinely, no, not once throughout the time. Even when I was, studying at GCSE level and, doing 8, 9, 10 hours plus a day of studying just to make sure that I got the grades that I needed. I have never been, the top of the class in terms of marks. I definitely wouldn't have been the smartest in the class, but I knew that if I worked hard enough, I'd have, achieved what I needed to achieve, which is get the grades to get on to the next step. And that's the focus that I've always had, is just work hard enough to achieve the objective that's in front of you to be able to, move on to the next step. And so even if I was studying a subject that I didn't enjoy, I knew I just had to study it to get that grade to move on to the next step. And then once you get into medicine, yeah, there were bits and pieces that you might not have enjoyed more than others. But again, you knew at the end of the day you were going to become a doctor, and then you could decide what area you wanted to work in. I really enjoyed working through all the different placements in hospital and the different bits of each one, and some that you enjoyed, some you didn't. But at no point did I ever look and think, what am I doing? I shouldn't have picked this path. So again, nice to be able to get to where you wanted to be, but also when you get there to go, yeah, I'm glad I did that. It would be awful to get this far. And I do know some people who got to the point where they were qualified as a doctor and then thought, you know what, this isn't for me. And fair play to them. They've taken the plunge and gone into another career path and been much happier in that.
Yeah, no, definitely. So whilst you were doing the studying then, was sport always in your mind that you wanted to end up working in that area?
Yeah, I came from a sporty family. We always, participated in loads of sport and watched loads of sport, always loved sport. And I liked the idea of working in sports medicine, but it was probably a bit of an unrealistic dream, because the specialty of sports and exercise medicine didn't exist when I was going through the placements. So in my mind, I would do what my predecessors did, which is specialize in something else, like general practice or A&E or orthopedics or rheumatology, and then have a subspecialty or a special interest in sports medicine. So that's what I had in my mind, and that's always something that I wanted to do. And then just timing and luck, the specialty got recognized at a good time for me, and then that allowed me to go, full time into it, which was luck more than anything else. There's a lot of, top class guys came before me who just didn't have that opportunity.
And so how was that transition then, from going from education, all of those placements? What was like your first actual role?
So in medicine, you do your 5-6 years uni, and then you're qualified as a doctor, but there are a few kind of compulsory years to get through. So in my year, I was the last year of junior house officer. So it was a 1 year working in the hospital. That was the year where we're doing 100-hour weeks and all the rest of it. They've since changed that to a 2-year foundation program, but basically you just rotate through different placements with no specific career in mind. It's you get some surgical specialties, some general medical specialties, and at the end of that, then you branch out into your medical specialties like cardiology, rheumatology, respiratory, or your surgical specialties, or your pediatrics, or your obs and gynae, and then your general practice. So it's at that point that you branch out. And at that, when I came through, sports medicine and sports and exercise medicine was very much a medical specialty. So we were encouraged to do 2 years of core medical training in the hospital. So you'd rotate through. I did rheumatology, cardiology, dermatology, elderly care, and do your exams in general medicine. So your membership of the Royal College of Physicians exams. And then once you get through that stage, then you can apply for your specialty training. And that's when you go for your consultancy training. And that's when you really sort of subspecialize. And that's when I get into the sports and exercise medicine training scheme in Liverpool, which was a 4-year training scheme. So from 1999, when I started studying medicine, to then becoming a consultant in 2013. So it's a 14-year journey, 5 years of full-time studying as a student, and then the rest of the time you're working as a doctor, but with the goal in mind of becoming a consultant in that specialty of your choice.
And so was that like a continuation, like you mentioned at school, that you were always, you knew what subjects you wanted to do, it was kind of a pathway, and you're quite specific in terms of how you're going to do it. Was that the case from the medical side, from university, in terms of those subsequent courses? Did you pretty much have that mapped out?
Well, I wouldn't say mapped out, because when I finished uni, it was still, okay, I'll probably have to specialize in something else. And I was gearing myself towards either general practice or A&E. And what I did was, I'd done my elective as a student in Australia and loved it, and said, oh, I'd love to come back and work in Australia. So when I finished my junior house officer year, I went and worked in Australia for a year. And while I was in Australia, sports and exercise medicine got recognised in the UK and Ireland. And while I did have one eye on the Australian scheme, I knew if I went down that route, I'd probably stay in Australia forever. And that's not something that I really wanted to do. I definitely would have considered it, but it wouldn't have been first choice. But once it became reasonable or achievable to potentially do it in the UK and Ireland, then that's when I thought, okay, move home, and then you can gear everything towards that. So I couldn't really be focused all the way from the start because there was no obvious pathway. But then once it got recognised, then it was just a case of speaking to all the different people to say, right, what do I need to do to become a registrar in sports medicine? And that's when you got the advice, well, you need to do your core medical training, you need to get your exams. Somebody also suggested doing a master's. And by coincidence, when I was in Australia, the guy I was living with, Dave White, a good mate of mine, also wanted to do sports medicine, and he came home from work one day and announced that he had been accepted into the Masters in Sports Medicine in Glasgow, and he was taking a year out of work to do that. And I thought, you know what, that's actually a very good idea, because you get your Masters in a year, so you don't have to balance work and studying. And also at the end of that year, if I don't like it, then I haven't wasted anything more than a year, So I applied for the Trinity Masters, got into that, and then took a year out of work, did the Masters. And then at the end of that year, I knew 100%, this is for me, this is what I want to do. And that's when I could start to be a bit more, streamlined in my planning of, where I needed to be and when.
So in terms of going to the Australia, then, what was the particular reason for going there?
Just really to enjoy life in Australia. As I said, I had one eye on the training scheme, but when I went there, I worked as a resident medical officer, which is kind of like the second stage out of university. So your first stage there is an intern, which would have been the same as our junior house officer year. So I'd done that. So in the UK, you'd call it a senior house officer, SHO. Over there, it was a resident medical officer. So you're a doctor working on the wards, and they were quite flexible in the placements that you wanted to do. So I managed to get 6 months of orthopedics, 3 months of A&E, and 3 months of intensive care. So certainly specialties that had skills that would be aligned with skills that I'd need for sports medicine. So I was lucky in that regard. And I just find that the Australians have a really nice work-life balance. They just seem to, they go to work, they work hard, but they make sure they enjoy themselves outside of work. They've got a very outdoorsy way of life, which suited me, going for a run or surfing or whatever before work, cycling to and from work. And they also seem to work hard in blocks. I would have done an A&E, a 4-day on, 4-day off rota, which was just fantastic. You worked hard for 4 days, but then you had 4 days off. And if you took 4 days of leave, then you had 12 days off in a row, and you could go and explore the country and travel up the coast and whatever. So just wanted to experience working and living in Australia, and absolutely loved it. But it was, I'd always liked the idea of coming back to work and settle in Ireland, and it was nice to have that opportunity.
And did it feel like you were properly living there? I mean, I spent a year in Australia, and I definitely didn't feel like it was like backpacking. So it was a very different experience. But did you feel like you were properly settled there?
I think towards the end of the year, I started to feel as if I was, a resident in Australia. I think definitely the first 6 months you were in holiday mode, and I did have a few mates that were in Australia on holiday mode. That probably didn't help. And, meeting up with them when you're 4 days off, and then next thing you're blinked and you were back at work, So there was an element of the first 6 months was, probably a bit too much crack. And then the second 6 months, things settled down, and you got a sense of what life would be like in Australia. And I loved it. If it wasn't for the distance, I definitely could have seen myself staying there. But we have a lot of family in Ireland, and I think that's where I always wanted to settle, Ireland or the UK,
Whereabouts were you in Australia?
In Sydney. So stayed in Sydney for the year, did 6 months in Royal North Shore, which is just across the bridge. So it was nice, a lovely commute cycling across the bridge for that 6 months. And then the other 6 months was Manly. So you'd cycle down to the Circular Quay and get the ferry over to Manly, and then up the big hill into the very old Manly Hospital, which was quite an experience, but beautiful place, and stunning views over the harbour. So great placements, and thoroughly enjoyed it.
The Manly Beach is incredible. Was that the ferry where you go past the Opera House?
Yeah. So that was 6 months of the year cycling over the bridge to get to work, and then 6 months getting the ferry between the bridge and the Opera House to get to work. So there were worse commutes.
No, it's absolutely spectacular place. So when you moved to Dublin then, so how did you find that experience?
So I'd met my wife Roisin in 2012 when I was working in Liverpool, and she was living and working in Dublin. And because I'd spent 4 years in Liverpool, most of my sports medicine contacts were in Liverpool. It was looking like that's where I was going to, end up getting certainly the early part of my consultancy career. So Roisin was making plans to come to Liverpool, and then just right place at the right time, was at a conference in Dublin, and got introduced by Peter Bruckner. He was at Liverpool at the time, got introduced by him to Andy Franklin Miller and Diana Falvey, who were the sports medicine consultants in the sports surgery clinic, or SSC, the clinic I'm working in. And they were just happened to mention that they were looking to expand, but there weren't many sports medicine doctors in Ireland. So Peter introduced me to them. And that was maybe 6 months out from my consultancy. And they invited me over to the clinic for 4 weeks and just said, come work, see what we do, see if you like it. And at the time I was working with Nigel Jones. He was like my mentor in Liverpool, and he was really supportive and sensible in his approach to my sort of working and education, and just looked and said, that's a great opportunity. I'm not going to stand in your way. So he was happy for me to go to Dublin for 4 weeks. And when I got to the clinic, I just absolutely loved it. It really felt like this is what I've been training for, is to work in a place like this. And because it's in the private sector, you have, the personnel with the skill set of elite sport, but delivering it to the general public, and all the equipment and all the investigations and all the treatment that elite sport has at your fingertips for the general public. And the mantra for the clinic is treating active people of all ages. So it doesn't matter whether you're an Olympic boxer or you're a 70-year-old who just wants to get back playing golf. You're treated with the exact same principles by the same people with the same treatments available to you. And, it's just a very rewarding place to be. I learned so much in that 4-week block. I just thought, yeah, 100%, this is a place for me. So instead of Roisin coming to Liverpool, I moved to Dublin, and I've been working in the clinic ever since then.
Right. So you were at Liverpool FC prior to that then?
Yes. So I did 4 years in the city of Liverpool as part of my consultancy. And in that, you get sort of rotated through different medical specialties and sports medicine placements that ultimately allow you to have, tick off all the boxes in your syllabus to be able to be accredited as a consultant in sports and exercise medicine. So throughout that 4 years, I did placements in A&E, orthopedics, general practice, public health, disability sport, rehabilitation medicine, worked at the English Institute of Sport, worked at the London Olympics and the Paralympics, worked at the Mersey Tigers, who were the professional basketball team, and then worked 2 seasons at Liverpool. So my last 2 years was much more focused on sports medicine, because that's what I wanted to do, and there was flexibility built within the program. So I did 2 seasons at sports or at Liverpool, working with the reserves in the academy. Nigel Jones, who was my mentor, was the doctor there, so I was working with him. So it was a great opportunity, a fairly unique opportunity to be able to work at that level, but to have someone there that you were learning from. So it wasn't a sink or swim type placement that a lot of sports medicine opportunities can be. I actually had that safety net of, Nigel was there and I could learn from him, and we could chat through things on a daily basis, and that was just an unbelievably enjoyable but worthwhile opportunity.
So was that your first real role in sort of actively working for a long time in sport then?
Yeah, but before that, because I was working mostly in hospital placements, any commitment to sport would have been outside of that. So I had worked in Irish judo, Ulster karate, Northern Ireland football at under 17s and under 19s. When I got to Liverpool, I started looking around to see what jobs in sports medicine there were. And I saw that the Mersey Tigers, the professional basketball team in Liverpool, had just advertised for a sports medicine consultant to come and work with them. And their, desirable and essential criteria were way beyond what I had to offer. So what I did, I contacted them and said, look, I've just moved to Liverpool. I'm doing a consultancy program in sports medicine. I have a master's. I'd be keen to work with the person who gets that job. And they got back to me within about half an hour and said, yeah, you'd be perfect for the job. So in other words, nobody else applied. So that was a real sink or swim moment, in that, they wanted me to set up a sports medicine department with, a physiotherapist and a physical therapist. They didn't have money. As with many jobs in sports medicine, they didn't have money to pay me. They did for the physio and for the physical therapist, which was a discussion we had. And we talked about potential money in the future, which never happened. But I could see it was a great opportunity. And actually, they'd never had anything before. So anything that I put in place was better than what they were used to. And we actually ended up having a really successful couple of seasons. We won one trophy in the first year, and we won all 3 trophies available to us in the second season. We did the treble, which had never been done before. And it was class. Absolutely loved it. Really good experience, both clinically and also just sort of, managerially and politically, just seeing how those organizations work. So then it was at that point that then the role came up at Liverpool. So definitely Liverpool was the highest profile role that I'd had. But I'd worked in loads of different sports at lots of levels before that. And
how does the politics differ? So you've got something which has got basically nothing, and you go into like an absolutely huge institution like Liverpool. What's it like going into that sort of environment?
Totally different. Even the culture within basketball is just so different from soccer. Basketballs are a very laid back sport, and they do their training they play 3 to 4 games a week. So they'll have a training session, then they'll play a game, and they might not have time to have another training session before their next game. So pre-season is hugely important. And then really it's about maintenance and tweaking through the season. And then you're into, making changes then after that. So one of the best things the club did, and they did this, I wasn't involved in this, was bringing in a Spanish strength and conditioning coach who had worked in the Spanish leagues. And that was a huge step forward for them, because as much from a robustness and an injury prevention point of view, I don't think they appreciated that at the time. I think they were thinking more performance gains, but actually just to be able to keep the players on the pitch with that, tight schedule made our lives a lot easier as medics. And we would work closely then with S&C to make sure that what he was working on was as much from a robustness and injury prevention point of view as, just getting strong and getting big and all the rest of it, because obviously the agility is hugely important. And being too heavy is very detrimental from a performance point of view. So he was aware of all that. He'd worked in basketball, but these were discussions that we had. And the injuries that you would see were very different. The politics were unique at the Mersey Tigers just because of the owner and certain issues around the owner and promises not made and promises made that never came to fruition and all the rest of it. Football then obviously much more organized, much more structured, but then I was going in at a level where you didn't have much responsibility at all. So I could just see, okay, this is a great opportunity to just observe and learn. And that's the way I took it. I helped out when I could, chipped in when I could, made myself as available as possible and keen to learn and keen to work. But I didn't have much responsibility, which was my last opportunity to do that. I knew that once I finished and I was a consultant, I'd never have that opportunity again. So while there was a bit of frustration at times where you think, you're not really doing much, actually, I was being paid to learn, and that was just a fantastic experience. And unless I really take a big step backwards, it's an experience I'll not have again,
Yeah. And then in terms of the working in the academy then, so how much link, I know there were 2 separate sites, so the first team's at Melwood, you're at Wellwell, where the first team's now based. Do you have much link with the staff there and the players?
Yeah, there was a good link. Obviously, the physical split made things a little bit challenging, but I know you were chatting to Andy Renshaw recently, and actually for the 2 years that I was there, Andy was the head physio at the academy. And, I get on absolutely brilliantly with Andy and the lads that were there, and worked probably as closely with the physios as I did with Nigel, because Nigel had other roles to do, so he wouldn't have been there as much as I was there. So loved working with those lads. And there was a bit of cross cover. So if Zaf Iqbal, who was the doctor for the first team at the time, if he was away with the team or if he had another commitment, they might have asked me and or Nigel to go up and cross cover with the first team. So there was that side of things in terms of working with the first team. But then you would have players who were in the development squad or in the academy who were invited up to train with the first team from an experience point of view, or actually if they were starting to push to that level, they were being invited up and possibly with the view to getting some game time. So the big one at the time was Raheem Sterling. So he was there for my first year, but by the second year, because of, you know, his obvious skills, he was brought onto the first team, and we didn't see much of him at the academy then after that. So there was reasonably good communication between first team and reserves and academy, and I know that's now improved further as the first team have moved out to Kirby side.
And what's it like going in there? You're relatively inexperienced, your first job in that really big team, and you do come across the likes of Steven Gerrard, Carragher. I know Sterling wasn't a big star then, but like Luis Suarez, I think, was there in your time.
Yeah, I'm a Liverpool fan, and I've always been a Liverpool fan. And, you know, obviously when you get that opportunity to go and work there, you have to go, right, I'm not a Liverpool fan. You know, you have to come out of fan mode and say you're there to do a job. And I would say 99% of the time I was successful at that. The one time I became starstruck was the day I met Stevie Gerrard. And I was like, oh my God, this is like the guy that I've seen on the pitch. And, you know, as a fan, have loved him as the team captain. And I was starstruck the day I met him. And, you know, subsequently met him several times, and you wise up and you get on with it. But yes, starting out at that level, you know you're not supposed to be a fan and be starstruck. But I have to put my hands up on that and say that day that I met Stevie G, I was starstruck, and got home and was like, I met Stevie G today, you know. So that was class. And yeah, the longer you work in elite sport, the more normal it becomes to meet stars like that, and the less starstruck you are. But I hope I never get to the point where I'm ever blasé about it. It's a pleasure to work and deal at that level and to meet these guys, and you always get a buzz out of it. I still do. Starstruck's not a word I would use, but certainly, you know, delighted when I do meet people like that and just go, oh, look, there's your man off the TV when you're playing the All Blacks and you see the best players in the world running around, you know.
Yeah, I think we'll let you off for Stevie G. He's a special one.
Yeah, exactly.
He just got the Villa job today. I just seen that as well. So that's.
I knew that was in the pipeline. Actually, I'd seen that in the news. So fair play. He's worked hard. He's definitely earned a Premiership gig.
Yeah, no, he definitely has. So so we backtracked a bit there. And so then, was it from Liverpool then that you did move over to Ireland for this role?
Yeah. So then, 2013 was the end of my consultancy training in the city of Liverpool, and at that time there was a potential opportunity to stay on at Liverpool Football Club, but the job had come up at the clinic in Dublin. And because I'd gone out to Dublin in that last year in 2013 and absolutely loved it, and could just see that there was that opportunity to, you know, continue to learn and develop, and was working a different area. But as I say, it just felt like that was the type of role that I had trained for. Then I made the decision to move to Ireland for that role in SSC, and that's where I've stayed. I'm still working at that clinic, and, you know, still loving it.
So what was the remit then when you went in there?
So SFC, Sports Surgery Clinic, it's the biggest sports medicine and orthopaedic hospital and clinic in Ireland. So we see in the sports medicine department, we see about 350 people a day in the clinic. So there's a huge throughput of patients coming through, and you get patients of all walks of life, all ages, all shapes and sizes, all levels of sport. So we would have Olympic athletes coming to us before big competitions. We would have, you know, professional athletes, professional boxers, MMA fighters, golfers. But then we get some people that just have a degenerative knee and haven't been getting better, can't do their activity. That might be tennis, it might be golf, it might be walking, it might be Pilates, whatever it is. It's just people who have a musculoskeletal complaint that's restricting them in some way, usually restricting them from their activity. You occasionally get people who are completely sedentary, and have just heard that, you know, we might be able to help them or fix them and they'll come along. But most people are active and have an issue that they want to get better. And I like to think that we, you know, can offer a solution to the majority of people. Obviously, you can't fix everyone, but we certainly do our best. And most people are very happy. And that's one of the things that attracted me to sports medicine, was the fact that it's one of the rare specialties that you can fix people. So people can come with an issue and you can cure them and discharge them. Orthopedics is quite like that. But there's lots of specialties in medicine like cardiology, rheumatology, respiratory, and people come with chronic diseases that are not curable. You're trying to improve their quality of life. You're trying to, you know, prolong their life, but you can't cure them. And I love the fact that in sports medicine, you can fix people, you can cure them of whatever their complaint is. most of the time, not always, but that's quite a rewarding area to work in, is the fact that people come with an issue, you can fix them and say, cheerio, give me a shout if you need anything.
And was part of that move then to Dublin, was that when you got involved with, well, it was the Irish rugby team, but rugby in general?
Yeah, when I moved to Dublin, it was purely to work in the clinic, and for the first year, that's all I did, and thoroughly enjoyed it. Was very happy there. I did miss pro sport and elite sport, and I always had one eye on whatever roles were out there, and spoke to several people. And then Leinster Rugby at the time, they approached me in towards the end of that first year and asked would I come on as their lead doctor for their team. And then for 2 years I did Leinster and the clinic, and that was a very busy and challenging 2 years, because the quantity and variety and severity of injuries that you see in rugby, you should definitely have a full-time doctor there. The only thing that stops that from happening is the finances. To put it into context, at Liverpool, between the senior team and the academy and the reserves, they had Peter Bruckner as sort of head of sports medicine. They had Zaf Iqbal as the first team doctor. They had Nigel Jones as the academy doctor, and then they had me there as well, kind of helping out. So there were 4 doctors, and 2 full-time and 2 part-time. And part-time was essentially 50% role. So say you had 3 doctors, 3 full-time doctors. At Leinster, I was trying to do that job just myself, with 2 mornings a week. That was it. That's the only commitment that I had. So much of that job was done on the phone while I was trying to run a clinic in SSC in the evenings, going to games. We had other doctors that had been there a long time and help out with games, and that was invaluable. But the games were often on Saturday, and then your post-game medicals would have been Sunday, and you're working clinic Monday to Friday plus once in Leicester. So you were doing 6 or 7 days a week, every single day for 11 months of the year, and it was exhausting. And when the job came up then at the IRFU with the men's national team, and I got that, I remember some people saying, "Oh, that's going to be a lot of time away from home." I just thought, well, it couldn't be worse than what I'm doing at the minute, And in hindsight, actually, the work-life balance is so much better in camp. The camp now. So in 2016, I started working with the Irish team. So stopped working with Leinster, started working with the Irish rugby team, and it's very intense for 3 blocks of the year. So you've got your autumn series, your Six Nations, and then your summer tour. So that takes up about 5 months of the year, and for that 5 months, you're full-time in camp. Yes, you get home, a couple of times a week. But you live and work with the team in the hotels and travel with the team, and it is very intense. But then outside of that, you're full-time in clinic, and it's a much nicer work-life balance. And yes, you keep in touch with the provinces, the clubs, to make sure that the whatever players are injured are meeting their markers on return, and keeping the coaches up to date. So there's a lot of communication that happens outside of that time. But from a work-life balance, it's actually, for me, much more manageable in the role I'm in now than that 2 years when I was at Leinster, when it just felt like you were doing 2 full-time jobs.
And how does it feel in terms of the difference between working in football, basketball for a little period of time as well, football, rugby? Obviously, there's going to be some physical differences in the athletes, but are there any other fundamental differences other than budget, maybe?
Yeah, rugby is a very unique sport. I'd always remembered rugby doctors, giving a bit of abuse to football doctors about you don't know what work is and all the rest of it. And this was when I was working in football, and my rugby doctor mates were laughing at me, and I was like, "What are you talking about? We work hard, and we've got lots of injuries to deal with." And then you go to rugby, and you're like, okay, I see what they're talking about. And as I say, just the quantity and the severity and the variety and the frequency of injuries that you deal in rugby is just way beyond what you see in most other sports. And also what the lads are used to and expected to play through in rugby is way more than what you see in football. I always remember when I was just starting out, I think I might have even been a student at the time. I was at a conference in Ireland, and Gary O'Driscoll was getting a talk. Gary had been Irish team doctor, Lions doctor, and was then working at Arsenal as their team doctor. And that was a question he would get all the time, the difference between rugby players and football players. And he said the best analogy you can get is, in rugby, you're often grabbing the lad by the arm and saying, look, it's not safe for you to keep playing on. You need to come off the pitch. And he says, sometimes in football, you might be pushing the lad back on, saying, look, you're grand, you need to get back on the pitch. And that's a real challenge when you've got guys that just won't tell you how sore they are, will try and hide things from you, will try and play through things that they really shouldn't be playing through. And that's been the culture. And you're trying to go in and protect their health and their welfare, but balance that with their expectations, the coach's expectations, the culture of the sport, and just trying to negotiate those two things is definitely a challenge, having come from football. Because that, football do a really good job of, protecting the players, and often players won't go back on until they've hit all their markers and they're perfect. That's often not the case in rugby, in that it's the players wouldn't accept that. They're like, why are you waiting? Why are we waiting for another week or two? I'm ready to go now, So trying to negotiate that can be challenging.
Do you think that must be a cultural thing? It can't be like that all players. Do you think that's they've been brought up like that, rather than it's just different personality types? Because football's are obviously incredibly focused and single-minded as well.
Yeah, it's definitely a cultural thing. It's that the mentality of rugby. It's that sort of the macho bravado of you can be hurt and you should play on, and I don't think that's a good thing. This is something that you're constantly battling against. But it's it's very rare you'll see someone stretchered off in a rugby field, and if you do, they're generally very hurt, because if they can walk off, they will walk off. And if you call the stretcher, they'll look at you and say, what are you doing? And they'd much rather be carried off, limped off, helped off, than be taken off in the stretcher. In football, that's just not the case. It's not the culture. It's almost like a badge of honor to be taken off on a stretcher, because it's proof that you're really injured. So there's definitely a cultural difference in what they expect of themselves and their bodies, and how much they're prepared to push through. And that's really challenging, because you're always trying to work out, well, what is okay to push? Where's my line that I'm saying, okay, it's safe even though you're sore. I've explained the risk to you. Yes, you can, play. I'll make you available. I'll tell the coach that you can train and you can be available for selection. And that can be difficult. I just think in football, because of the culture in football, because of the way they're, the treatment from a very young age of this superstar coming through, and they can be pandered to on occasion, and they get whatever they want. They basically dictate what, how they want to feel when they're on the pitch. And of course, there's individual differences. Gary O'Driscoll even gave the example of, I think it was Ciaran at the time, had a large laceration in his foot, and he was trying to rule him out at half time, and Ciaran was having none of it. He said, no, stitch it back up again and then go back on. So of course there are individual differences, and vice versa in rugby. We will get some players who are, need a bit of a nudge in the right direction to get them back on. But just as a general rule, I find that rugby players will play through a lot more and hide things more than in football, and both of those bring their own challenges.
Must be the Russian mentality for our Ciaran, I guess.
Quite possibly.
Yeah, no, great. I know you've got another meeting to go to, so I've got a couple more questions. But what would you say has been some of the most inspirational people, or people that have had the biggest influence? You've mentioned a couple of them, but are there any ones that you've not mentioned that you think have had a big part to play?
The one good thing about coming through to a specialty like sportsman is you have to work in loads of different areas. So you get to work with loads of different people, and I've always been of the opinion that everybody has something to offer, and therefore I can learn something from every single person that I meet and every single person I work with. And that's always the attitude I've had. And when I leave an attachment, I'll always look back and say, what did I take from that? What can I take forward going into other specialties? And sometimes that's a positive that you will take and try and implement. And occasionally that might be a negative that you say, right, I need to make sure I don't work like that or behave like that or treat people like that or whatever it is. So I've just been really fortunate in the people that I've met and worked with. And there are so many people that have helped me along the way and, been influential in my career. I suppose two standout ones would be Nigel Jones, who I mentioned. And for 4 years in Liverpool, he acted as a mentor and as a friend. And one of the best things about Nigel was just how supportive and accommodating he was, he just would say, look, what do you need, or what do you want to get out of your attachments, what are your placements? And he would make sure that that's what happened, you know, and that I could get whatever I needed to become as good a consultant as I could be at the end of it. So, you know, still in touch with Nigel regularly, and, you know, meet up with him whenever I can. And then in Ireland, Iten Falvey has been great as well. Iten was the Irish Rugby Team Doctor when I arrived. I'm pretty sure that he was the person that spoke to Leinster and said, look, you know, if you're looking for a sports medicine doctor, Ciaran might, you know, be useful. And then when it came to the Ireland job, I'm sure they spoke to Iten to say, okay, who do you think should get the job? And I'm sure he might have put my name forward. And then when it came to the Lions gig as well, I've no doubt, having worked at the Lions, he might have put my name forward. So I'd say Iten has been very helpful at, you know, just pointing people towards me as jobs have come up. So definitely I'd say he's been influential in my career as well.
And another difficult question, but in terms of like the most memorable experiences, whether it's in sport or not, what are there any of those that stand out?
Two big ones that stand out for me, both with the Irish rugby team. The first one would be in Chicago when we beat the All Blacks for the first time. So in an attempt to try and, you know, promote rugby within America, we've been out there a couple of times to play, and, you know, it's been very successful in that massive crowds coming to the games, massive publicity out there, and rugby is growing and it continues to grow in America. So the All Black, we were invited to play the All Blacks in Chicago, so it was in the Chicago Bears Stadium. Huge crowd, mostly Irish, and having never beaten them before, obviously, you know, there's a chance that you'll beat them, but I wouldn't say you can go into a game against the All Blacks feeling super confident, you know. And with about 5 minutes to go, we were thinking, oh my God, I think, you know, we were far enough ahead that I was like, I'm not sure that they're actually going to come back, because there have been many occasions in the past where we've built a massive lead against them and they've chipped away and chipped away and chipped away, and in the last kick of the game, overtaken us, you know, and that's just that frustration. But looking at the clock and the scoreboard, I remember chatting to the S&C coach in the sideline and going, I'm not sure they're going to catch us here, you know. And then as you know, it comes to the last 2 minutes and you're thinking there is literally not enough time for them to beat us here, and that excitement, you know. And then just afterwards, it was just phenomenal to just have that monkey off your back to be able to beat them and just know from now on that they're not the team that you've never beaten, you know. So that was huge. Loved that. And then another one was when we won the Grand Slam in 2018. The last game was against England in Twickenham, a place where we don't often win, and England were, you know, going really well, and we'd been going really well. And went to the game, it was snowing, and we got a really good start to the game and built the lead, and actually throughout the game never looked like we were going to get beaten, just, you know, just kept pushing on and building and building. And just afterwards, the snow was coming down, we were in Twickenham, I'm pretty sure it was St. Patrick's Day, and we just won the Grand Slam, and I was just like, wow, this is just something special, you know. So those are two occasions that really stand out of being, you know, memories that I'll always take with me, you know, how I felt in those moments.
And what is the celebrations like after those sort of occasions? I mean, I can imagine to some extent, but what's it like from obviously the players, but the whole squad perspective?
I'd say the general sense was similar to what I've just described, and, you know, just huge sense of pride and elation and celebration, because, you know, everybody has worked so hard to get to that point, and it's just so rewarding to see all of that work come to fruition. You know, there's a massive sense of relief as well. You know, it's confirmation that your belief wasn't misguided, that all of those times that you thought, actually, we have a chance of doing this, we, you know, a good chance, we know we can do this. So there's huge pride in it, there's huge relief in it, there's, you know, massive celebration, and that continues. You can imagine a few beers that night, and depending on when your next games are, it might even continue into the next day. And then, you know, if it's an away game like both of those were, then you come home, and then you've got the euphoria of the home crowd as well. You know, in Ireland when we won the Grand Slam, you go out to the president's house and you meet the president, and it's just it's accredited for the achievement that it is, and you know, the country celebrates with you, and it's really nice when you actually, you know, you see the crowd celebrating, and you think, God, you know, the lads have really done something for the country. And I think that's for me is one of the best things about working in the job, is that, you know, if you weren't working there, you'd be one of the guys standing in the crowd celebrating the achievement of the team, and that's just really rewarding, you know.
Well, I'll let you go and prepare for the next hopeful victory over the All Blacks. So I really appreciate your time squeezing me in while you're in camp. So thank you very much for doing that.
No problem. It's been a pleasure, Andy.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ciaran. Cheers.
See ya.